皆様お待たせをいたしました。お時間となりましたので、ただいまより第3回日本アフリカビジネスフォーラム JABF2021 セッション5アフリカの地域統合を開会いたします。どうぞ皆様最後までお付き合いをいただきますようによろしくお願いを申し上げます。なお、本フォーラムは日本語、英語、フランス語の音声にて配信をしております。プルダウンメニューから本日の日付とご希望の言語を選択してご視聴お願いいたします。それではまず最初に、国土交通省海外プロジェクト審議官、横田正文様より開会のお言葉を頂戴いたします。横田様、よろしくお願いいたします。
国土交通省海外プロジェクト審議官の横田でございます。開会にあたり、日本国土交通省を代表して一言ご挨拶申し上げます。本会議の開催にあたり、主催者であるアフリカ開発銀行の皆様のご尽力に対し、心より感謝を申し上げます。また、本日ご挨拶をされるイブラヒム・アサネ・マヤキ長官、パネリストのペッティーナ・ガバ博士、佐藤隆様、宮本洋一様、ジョイ・カリゲクワ様、菅野正文様、そしてモデレーターの池上美恵子様に心より感謝申し上げます。本日ご参加のアフリカ各国政府の皆様、アフリカ各国企業の皆様に厚く御礼を申し上げます。そして多くの日本企業の皆様にご出席をいただいており、御礼を申し上げます。本日のフォーラムは昨今の COVID-19 をめぐる情勢を勘案し、一部登壇者のみ会場から参加されるハイブリッド形式でのオンライン開催となりました。オンライン開催という形ではありますが、このような機会を持つことができ、大変喜ばしく思います。国土交通省では、我が国が提唱する質の高いインフラ投資を促進するため、アフリカ各国インフラ担当省との間で、2015年から官民インフラ会議を開催し、自由で開かれたインド太平洋に基づき、主にアフリカ北部回廊開発、西アフリカ成長リング広域開発、中原回廊開発のアフリカ3重点地域開発に関わる国を中心として、これまで13カ国との間で会合を開催してまいりました。また、官民インフラ会議を開催した各国との間で、会議後も相手国政府関係者と我が国インフラ関連企業等との対話をフォローアップ、継続するために、質の高いインフラ対話を7カ国と開催してまいりました。日本の提供する質の高いインフラは、ライフサイクルコストから見た経済性の向上、技術移転、高い信頼性と技術力を有しています。2019年のTICAD7においては、メイドウィズジャパン、つまりアフリカの皆様と一緒になって質の高いインフラを整備し、安全管理、施工管理、品質管理などの技術移転も進めていくことを提唱しました。また、アフリカにおけるインフラ需要は大変に大きいものと認識しており、日本企業も高い関心を寄せております。2016年8月にケニアで開催された TICAD6 を契機として、アフリカのインフラ分野に関心を持つ183社からなるアフリカインフラ協議会、通称 JAIDA が設立され、官民一体となってアフリカにおけるインフラ整備の現地進出を支援しているところであります。今後も2022年にチュニジアで開催予定である TICAD8 も見据えて、JAIDA とともに各国との官民インフラ会議や質の高いインフラ対話により、日本企業の技術や経験等の積極的な情報発信を行い、良いプロジェクトの形成により、アフリカのさらなる経済発展や民生の向上に寄与してまいりたいと思います。さて、本日のアフリカ地域統合のセッションでは、本年1月に運用開始されたアフリカ大陸自由貿易協定に関連し、アフリカにおけるインフラ連結性、制度規制緩和調和、貿易金融等に関するパネルディスカッション、プレゼンテーション等が実施される予定と聞いておりますが、これら課題に対し、我が国が提唱する質の高いインフラ投資が貢献できるものと確信しております。今後、日本、アフリカ双方のインフラ分野での協力がより一層進展すること、また多くの日本企業がアフリカでインフラ事業に携われること、また日本、アフリカの友好関係が発展することを記念して、私の挨拶とさせていただきます。ありがとうございました。
横田様、ありがとうございました。それでは次に、アウダネパッドの CEO、イブラヒム・アサデマヤキ長官よりお言葉をいただきます。では、よろしくお願いいたします。
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I would like to recognize Mr. Masafumi Yokota, the Deputy Minister for International Projects of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, Professor Mieko Ikegami, as the moderator, and all the distinguished participants here present, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and thank particularly the African Development Group for having put so much energy in organizing this event. We are gathered today to celebrate and strengthen the economic ties that link Africa and Japan together. As we commemorate Africa Integration Day, we should be mindful of how our common past has shaped the present milestones that we have reached, and how this past will usher us, if considered carefully, into a future of lasting successes. Firstly, one must not forget the origin of regional integration. Why is it more crucial here than on any part of our world? From the onset, we have inherited a continent that was fragmented, shared like a precious cake, by the European superpowers gathered at the Berlin Conference of the last 19th century. We are much aware of how the systemic colonization that followed has destroyed the livelihoods, the culture, the manners of socialization and worship that our African ancestors used to enjoy. Here is why the fathers of independence in the 1950s fought for a united Africa, as they considered economic and political integration as a necessary precondition for the socio-economic development of our continent. At the core of the fight is the concept of collaboration, which is the action of working with someone to produce something. In that instance, the someone I'm referring to were the estranged African neighbors, except for the transfrontier populations. Knowing their neighbors was more a story of ignorance and mistrust than one of cooperation and solidarity, direct consequence of a creation of artificial frontiers. As it is still the case in West Africa, you could find a tribe like the Hausas in northern Ghana, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Nigeria. To produce something means that investing in our productive capacities has been neglected. We have not yet counted the devastating consequences of a colonial system and too often import foreign products that we could manufacture here. Collaboration, once again, was at the core of the thinking of the founding fathers of the OAU. Since the intangibility of inherited frontiers was adopted as a customary rule after independence, no one could create African superstates. So as far as collaboration is key, it will never be enough to trigger a lasting transformation of our continent. We need to integrate to transform, and I have identified two dimensions to do this. First, greater integration with the African Continental Free Trade Area. It has been the center of attention of many conferences on regional integration for the last couple of years, so I will not elaborate on that. Second, building on African industries. As Japan has succeeded in industrializing and modernizing itself from the Meiji era, we also need to use the current opportunity of COVID-19 to develop regional strategies for industrialization. The regional level can help build adequate strategies taking into account the specificities of one regional economic community and create new synergies and value chains between countries. If we don't succeed in climbing the hills and fighting the challenges that we face on the road of greater integration, we will never tackle the greatest challenge ahead of us, getting 400 million Africans to have a job in the next 20 years. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you fruitful discussions.
馬焼長官、ありがとうございました。それではこれよりパネルディスカッションに移らせていただきます。モデレーターをお務めをいただきますのは、アフリカ連合開発庁長官特別顧問の池亀美恵子先生でございます。池亀先生は日本人国際公務員のパイオニアとして国連事務局、UNDP、FAO、WFP において計33年間にわたり勤務をされ、開発途上国の社会経済発展向けの支援に従事してこられました。1993年の第1回ティカットの立ち上げから関与され、ティカットの多国間的側面を強化するため、共催者の拡大に尽力をされました。それでは池上先生、どうぞこの後よろしくお願いいたします。
Good morning in United States. Good afternoon and good morning in Africa, depending on where you are. And good afternoon and good evening in Japan. It is my great honor to take this task as a moderator for this very important session. Before I get into the substantive comment on this subject, I would like to congratulate the Secretariat to have this innovative idea to have women, Japanese professionals, to be very visible in this forum. Those participants and the audience who have been looking at the program, you will note all moderators are Japanese women professionals. This is against the background, as you know, that Japan's women's status is somewhere 120 out of 150. This is something that Japan has to learn from African countries. Having said that, let me just remind you there are 3 questions raised in concept note, and I hope at the end of this session, we will have some answers to these pertinent 3 questions. First, how can the global trade and investment partners get benefits from AFTA despite the COVID-19 pandemic? Number 1. Number 2, how can the private sector engage in setting the policy on AFTA, for example, customs systems, digital transformation, trade finance, and empowering women through improving access to trade? Thirdly, what sort of incentive and or peer pressure system can swiftly and effectively improve business environment to fulfill the opportunities created by AFTA? These are the 3 questions. I hope that discussion and panelists will help us to get the good responses and answers to these pertinent questions. Now I would like to invite the panelists to go to our very important substantive discussion. First, I would like to invite Dr. Patina Gapa, who is a principal legal advisor from the Office of Secretary General, AFTA Secretariat. You are kindly requested to give your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm from Zimbabwe, and we believe in something called ga ga ga, which means the shortest way of doing things as possible. So I will say all protocol observed. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be in such distinguished company. And thank you so much to the Africa Development Group and the organizers for this wonderful, wonderful session and for inviting the AFCFT Secretariat. I was going to start my presentation with facts and figures, just to tell you where we are at the Secretariat here in Ghana. But I have been inspired by the CEO of NEPAD, Auda, for that. Thank you so much for that wonderful, rousing introduction. And I want to start by echoing his remarks and by saying that the AFCFTA is nothing short of a miracle. It is an idea whose time has come because from slavery to colonialism to unfair terms of trade, Africa is a continent that has suffered great brutality, immense pain, and fundamental injustice. But through all of this, Africa and Africans have been known for their resilience. And I believe strongly that the AFCFTA, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, is a symbol of that resilience. It is an idea that was born from the decolonization movement. Kwame Nkrumah and the thinkers of his era believed strongly that without economic integration, there could be no political integration. So for us to stand here in 2021 to implement an idea that is as old as that, in fact, an idea that is probably older, because there was African trade before there was colonization. There was African trade in the different kingdoms of Africa. For us to stand here and celebrate this achievement is nothing short of a miracle. So we started trading on 1 January 2021. The COVID pandemic delayed plans to start implementing the agreement on 1 July 2020. That had been the expected date. And so in Ghana right now, in Accra, where we have the headquarters of the AFCFTA, a fledgling secretariat has begun its work with multilateral and bilateral funding, including from UNDP. And I'm delighted that my wonderful sister, Joy Katekegwa, is taking part in this program because she has been instrumental to that process, as well as, of course, the AFDB. And we're holding regular institutional meetings that will set the foundation now and for the future. Currently, we have 38 state parties. And I know that this is disappointing to some who believe that all 55 odd African states should be part of the AFCFTA, and this is absolutely correct. But we need to understand that it's a hugely ambitious continental free trade area. The ambition is continental with a vision stretching to 2063. So we have a potential 50 plus state parties, but it means that with 38 state parties, more than 2/3 have joined. And I want to emphasize that it really is a marathon and not a sprint, because what we're building in Africa is the most significant multilateral project since the conclusion of the Uruguay round that established the WTO. If you look at the numbers, they are staggering. We have a population of 1.3 billion in a $3.5 trillion economy. And we're looking at integration across an entire continent of 55, including some of the least developed countries in the world. So it is not possible that all African countries will be ready at the same time. Now, in terms of what is happening to actually implement the start of trading, significant work is being done to get the schedules ready and verified and certified, to complete negotiations on rules of origin, and to set up the dispute settlement mechanism. We are also hoping to complete the phase 1 negotiations before going on to phase 2. Now, the phase 1 negotiations are on the traditional trade areas, trade in goods, trade in services, and so on. And phase 2 negotiations are around intellectual property and investment protocol and competition policy. Now, it is clear, and I'm sure we're going to hear more on this from the presenter from the Customs Union, World Customs Union, that many African countries rely on customs revenue as a source of income. So in partnership with Afrexim Bank, we have set up an adjustment fund to cushion member states from shocks associated with opening up, such as loss of customs revenue, disruption to SMEs, and so on. And to avoid currency issues, we've also set up an African payments platform. And finally, we have begun work to set up an extremely ambitious dispute settlement mechanism modeled on that of the World Trade Organization. I'll be very happy to go into detail on some of these issues in the questions, but thank you so much for inviting me to speak.
Thank you very much for elaborated statement and giving us some of the issues and also the status of where we are. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Takashi Sato, who is a Regional Development Manager from the World Customs Organization. Now you have a floor.
ただいまご紹介預かりました WCO の佐藤と申します。本日は私が担当している WCO JICA プロジェクトでの経験を中心として WCO におけるアフリカの地域統合支援についてお話をさせていただきます。次お願いします。まず WCO について簡単にご説明させていただきます。WCO は1952年に設立された世界で唯一の税関の国際機関であり、世界中の183のメンバーで構成されています。本部はブリュッセルに所在しており、日本人である三栗谷邦夫が2009年から事務総局長を務めています。職員は約250名で、世界中の約70の国、地域から集まっており、国際色が豊かな職場となっています。次お願いします。WCO には3つの大きなミッションがあります。1つ目が税関手続きに関する国際標準を開発すること。2つ目が税関を含めた各国の政府機関及び他の他の国際機関や民間団体との協力を促進すること。そして3つ目がメンバーに対して効果的なキャパシティビルディング支援を実施することです。アフリカの地域統合については、この3つ目のミッションであるキャパシティビルディングの実施という観点から精力的に支援をしているところです。次お願いします。こちらが現在 WCO において実施しているアフリカ地域統合支援の例となります。例えば、パンアフリカプログラムのもと、EU 拠出によりアフリカ諸国に対して HS2022 の実施及び適用のため、またかつ長期的な目標として将来の HS バージョンを各地域及び大陸全体にタイムリーかつ協調的に適用するために必要な組織的能力と資源を提供することを目的としてプログラムを実施しています。また、今年1月に立ち上がったスウェーデンが実施するシーダプロジェクトにおいては、サブサハラアフリカにおける持続可能な開発のための貿易円滑化及び税関近代化プロジェクトのための支援を実施しています。JICA との共同プロジェクトでは、東アフリカ、北部回廊、中良回廊、西アフリカ成長リングにおける税関の連結性支援のため、マスタートレーナープログラム、MTP と略しますが、MTP を実施して、地域の研修教材及び研修人材育成のための支援をしております。これらアフリカ地域諸国に支援を限定したプロジェクトですが、その他にも様々な分野における税関支援を実施しており、アフリカ諸国を含めたキャパシティビルディング支援を行っています。次お願いします。マスタートレーナープログラム MTP はアフリカ地域における持続的な成長を目的として実施するキャパシティビルディング支援です。MTP のユニークな特徴として、支援対象国から少数の候補者を選出してもらい、WCO の専門家及び日本税関から派遣してもらう専門家とともに、各地域における共通の課題を含む独自の研修教材を作成し、また知識だけでなく、研修スキル等を身につけることにより、研修終了後に研修生自身がマスタートレーナーとして、当該国や地域における研修を実施する能力と教材を構築することです。この支援は複数年にわたりますが、研修生は固定となっており、すべての研修において能動的に参加をしてもらうことになります。これにより、アフリカ諸国において外部からの支援なしに研修を実施する能力と教材を手に入れることができます。次お願いします。マスタートレーナープログラムの実施として、今まで過去3年間で140のマスタートレーナーが生まれて、2万人に対して研修を実施しております。最後に、今後のアフリカコンチネンタル FTA の実施のための WCO の支援について説明をさせていただきます。まず、アフリカコンチネンタル FTA の事務局とは緊密に連携を取っており、現在、両機関においてさらなる協力を促進するための MOU を作成しています。また、今年の7月から4年契約で立ち上がった WCO JICA プロジェクトにおいては、東部、南部、西部アフリカ諸国に対して、原産地帰属の MTP を実施することとなっております。ご承知の通り、原産地帰属は FTA 実施のために必要不可欠で、かつ深い知識を求められる分野であります。この分野において WCO 及び日本税関の知識や経験を生かした支援をすることは、アフリカの連結性支援において非常に価値があり、有効なものだと自負しております。 その他、WCO の作成した国際標準やツールの導入、実施のための支援、メンバーが追加支援を拠出しているファンドを利用したアフリカの連結性支援は、WCO における最も重要なミッションの一つとなっております。次のページお願いします。最後に WCO のスローガンである Borders Divide Customs Connect を紹介して、私からのプレゼンテーションを終了させていただきます。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Mr. Sato, to explain what WCO does, particularly in the field of capacity building with diversified partners. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Yoichi Miyamoto, who is the president of Japan Africa Infrastructure Development Association, JAIDA, and he is also chairperson of the board and representative director of Shimizu Corporation. Sir, you have a floor.
はい、ありがとうございます。アフリカの皆様おはようございます。アフリカインフラ協議会会長の宮本です。通称 JAIDA と言っておりますので、今後は JAIDA という表現をさせていただきますが、JAIDA を代表して、我々のこれまでの活動であるとか、あるいは本セッションのテーマであるアフリカの地域統合に向けた取り組みについてお話をしたいと思います。通称 JAIDA はですね、2016年に開催された第6回のアフリカ開発会議 TICAD6 においてですね、その成果を踏まえて立ち上げた組織であります。そして国土交通省と民間企業、すなわち官と民が共同で立ち上げたということが特徴であります。JAIDA は建設、商社、金融、コンサルタント、エンジニアリング、メーカー、運輸など幅広い分野から現在では180を超える企業が参画しています。私が勤めております清水建設もその中の一員であります。JAIDA の取り組みは国土交通省とともにアフリカ各国で官民インフラ会議を開催し、日本の意図する質の高いインフラの理解を各国で深めていただく活動、およびアフリカ・日本のビジネスマッチングと双方が協力する開発計画を推進することであります。JAIDA はこれまでにアフリカ諸国12カ国を延べ14回訪問し、官民インフラ会議を開催しました。現地で参加した日本企業は延べ約400社になります。参加人員は約1000名であります。今年はコロナ禍により現地への訪問が叶わないため、オンラインでの開催に切り替え、これまでに5カ国の会合を開催しています。セミナーによる情報の発信に加え、首脳とのバイ会談、そしてインフラを担当されている各大臣とも会談の時間を取っていただき、日本に対する率直な要望や期待などを直に伺ってもいます。私が各国で開催されてきた官民インフラ会議や各国首脳会談とのバイ会談、そして TICAD などを通じて肌で感じているのは、日本の意図するところの質の高いインフラに対する大きな期待であります。ライフサイクルコストや環境、防災、健康への配慮など、日本がこれまで培ってきた技術を活用したインフラ整備そのものに対する期待に加え、技術やノウハウ、品質や改善に対する考え方や姿勢をプロジェクトを通じて現地に移転し、現地の能力向上を図るという、まさにメイドウィズジャパンの精神で行われる人材育成、エンパワーメントへの大きな期待であります。これらはすべて日本が提唱する質の高いインフラの重要な一面であり、そのご期待に応えていくことが何より大切であると考えています。アフリカは広大な面積と中国を超える人口を持つ一つの大陸としての大きな市場でありますが、これまで域内貿易は限られたものでした。しかし AFCFTA が今年1月に運用開始されたことによって、域内の物品及びサービスの単一市場が創設されることとなり、人や物の移動のみならず、投資が促進され、より持続可能な社会・経済開発に発展することへの期待が大きくなりました。例えば自動車メーカーのように、アフリカに完成車工場を持つケースでは、自由貿易圏内からよりスムーズな部品調達が可能になるでしょうし、域内他国への完成車の輸出も増えることが予想されます。 企業にとって必要になるのは、信頼性の高いサプライチェーンの構築と、それを補完するさまざまなインフラです。AFCFTA による地域統合の成功の鍵は、インフラにかかっていると言っても過言ではありません。アフリカ各国は国境を越えて、クロスボーダーで切れ目のないインフラを構築することが課題とされてきました。良質なインフラを整備し、提供できれば、内陸国を含めて経済への活性化につながります。また国だけでなく、地域としてインバウンド投資を呼び込み、企業誘致につなげることができれば、アフリカ全体に好循環をもたらすことになるでしょう。私たちはそのインフラ計画へのノウハウの提供、コンサルタント、設計、工事など、インフラ整備構築にもご協力してまいります。我々 JAIDA は、TICAD の基本理念であるアフリカのオーナーシップと国際的なパートナーシップをこれからも続けます。そして国連が提唱する持続可能な開発目標 SDGs やアフリカ連合が掲げる開発目標であるアジェンダ2063の実現に向け、日本とアフリカ双方の官と民の信頼関係を通じて、アフリカの持つ潜在能力が今後一層発揮されるよう貢献してまいりたいと考えています。よろしくお願い申し上げます。ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Mr. Miyamoto, explaining how the Association of Japan-Africa Infrastructure Development has been really taking place in African continent, and it is really encouraging activities. I thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Mr. Kusafumi Sugano, who is the Chief Representative in Africa, MITI, and he was a former Deputy Executive Director of JETRO in Africa. You have a floor. Mr. Sugano, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning to our friends in Africa. Please allow me to present in English and also using slides. Well, first of all, I'm here, I think, to talk about the Japanese perspective on what African integration, which has been discussed so far, especially from my experience working with business. Next slide, please. First of all, I just want to put the perspective over here. Japanese companies are no longer obviously Japanese. So we don't have the obvious Japanese brands run by Japanese people exporting stuff from Japan. In fact, for example, we got African executives. So common brands such as Toyota, Yamaha, Kansai Paint, Plascon, they are run by Africans. You look at ownership, for example. You see on the right, some quite major brands, Dimension Data, Unitrans, Dole, National Tobacco Enterprise, those are actually 100% owned by Japanese companies. There are also some startups and some established firms such as Zipline and Olam, which are also partly owned by the Japanese. And it's not just about capitalistic ownership. This industrial corporation, a typical example would be the roofing rolling mills in Uganda, where before Yodoko, the Japanese company, used to export galvanized steel to this group of companies. However, now they actually have 10% ownership, but also they have a technical alliance. So they actually buy the stuff together. They have the technology, bring the technology together. And now this Ugandan company has basically cornered the entire Great Lakes region, including DRC and South Sudan for steel products. Next page, please. Given that, so trade in Africa, as we know, has been weak. And because Japanese companies are now based in Africa in multiple forms, as explained before, this hurts Japanese companies too. Next slide, please. And you know why? I mean, our friends from the AFCFTA are the experts, but you look at the outside of the regional economic blocks, you look at the high most favored nation tariff rates. So, okay, it's understandable to have high tariff for completed vehicles. But you look at some of these lines and you get iron and steel, plastics. Those are intermediate goods, very essential for industrialization, which still have very high tariff rates. In fact, it's not that different from tariff rates from products coming from China, India, or Europe. Ideally, we should be at the stage of fertilizers. And this is where AFCFTA can certainly help. So next slide, please. And from these perspectives, we have now how Japanese companies see Africa. So as JETRO, with a state-owned investment and trade promotion agency, we do an annual survey of business consent conditions for Japanese affiliated companies in Africa. And yes, interest, despite COVID and everything, interest in Africa has been rising. Before it was 50%, now 60% people say that its positioning in Africa will increase. And why is that? We've asked some questions, and two of the major answers they've given were market expansion with the growth of population, and the other one was expectation for African free trade area. So basically, it's about the size of the African market and also the size importance of African unity as a production base. Next page, please. However, what's in it for Africa to collaborate with Japanese companies? Well, Japan can be a steady, long-term partner for Africa's industrial and commercial development. For the following reasons. We have skin in it. We have Japanese companies put in equity, usually, rather than debt. This means that we only make money when you do. Furthermore, competitive cutting-edge capital equipment provided by Japanese companies for use by African industries. That's something that we can do as an alternative to Europeans. Also, Japanese companies can have marketing know-how outside of Africa. And finally, as we've mentioned, we rely on local executives and managers and workers. So it's not just Japanese people doing this. It's good for African as well. Next page. Final slide. So in terms of Japan's strategic objective in Africa, we have the three overlapping objectives: to partner, to earn, and contribute. And all of that is in the context of working with and together earning from African industrial development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sugano, particularly giving us overview of how Japanese enterprises and companies are doing in Africa and potential for future, which is really encouraging. Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Joy Katekegua from UNDP. She is Regional Strategy Advisor of the Regional Bureau for Africa, UNDP. You have a floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And like my dear friend Patina, I will do the ga, ga, ga. I'm from Uganda, not Zimbabwe, but it makes a lot of sense. All protocol observed, Mr. Yokota, Mr. Mayaki, fellow panelists, thank you very much for the opportunity to engage. I'd like to share how UNDP sees the promise of AFCFTA. We situate our participation from a fatigue with development programming that bedevils a problem in Africa as one to solve externally. We turn it on its head and say structural transformation is critical. Africa's promise, the time has come, and therefore trade will play a critical role in bringing that to life. We also recall SDG 17, which is clear that trade is a means of implementation. So how does that come to life in the context of the AFCFTA, now that we're here talking also about Africa Integration Day? 3 key points. One is that the structural impediments to trade in Africa must be brought down. The second point then is that a new generation of technical assistance must be prioritized. And then the third one is the value of partnerships. Why must the structural impediments be put away with? We know the numbers, and they are disappointing and quite disheartening. Africa, in all of its glory and all of its resources, only 3% of world merchandise exports, only 2% world commercial services exports. Intra-African trade, only 18%. But in that 18% is a promise, and a promise that I'd like to say is where the AFCFTA gives us hope. Because in that 18%, you start to see value addition. In that 18%, you start to see a wider export base. You start to see more manufacturers. You start to see, agro-processing, medicines, clothing and textiles. Whereas with the rest of the world, you're still sending those raw materials. And so the AFCFTA is a valid proposition. But in order to bring it to life, we must remove those impediments. That's why the conversation today is quite energizing, because then we have to start to talk about how to move away from a technical assistance conversation that's really about policy ad infinitum, and rather touch the critical points that get in the way of Africa trading with itself. And the good news is that the thinking has been done. The African Union, and Mr. Mayaki is here with us today, the African Union has figured these things out through the Action Plan on Boosting Intra-African Trade. 7 key pillars in AUBIAT. So you have the trade policy, trade information, faster market integration, trade facilitation, trade finance, productive capacities, and another one that skips my mind right now. But the bottom line is that the thinking has been done. Therefore, there's a space for development cooperation to land specifically in that context that recalls that African integration and trade agreements ultimately are about strengthening the capacity to produce those goods that will benefit from the preferential market access. And so I'd like to challenge all of us today to think about a new generation of technical assistance, where we sort of go light on the question of, explaining the rights and obligations, and go more stronger foot on the pedal in getting those products, in supporting the production for the export base to increase. The final point, therefore, then is, well, what is the role of partnerships? And this is where UNDP works closely with the AFCFTA Secretariat. We believe in the promise, and we are investing in strengthening the initial capacities for the system to stand up. Because even as we talk about all of these things, the life and the success of the AFCFTA is really very much also linked to how strongly Bettina and her colleagues at the AFCFTA Secretariat can walk this dream to life. Because you'll agree with me, it's very much a reform agenda on the ground. And so working with them to strengthen those capacities at the institutional level is one big thing. The second big thing is, how can UNDP walk the talk on the question of productive capacities? We are present in all of the AFCFTA countries, certainly those that have ratified the agreement. And so listening to businesses and understanding what the critical issues are when women and youth-owned enterprises try to export is precisely where we are. Indeed, we're undertaking national consultations with a series of partners on the ground, ministries of trade, chambers of commerce, export promotion agencies, and the exporters themselves, and asking the penultimate question: how do you situate yourself in the promise of the AFCFTA? We need not theorize anymore about the AFCFTA. We have the conditional offers, and therefore understanding that and working in country to situate how the countries can position for the right investment proposition is the other thing we're doing. And then finally, of course, saying, well, now that you know what the promise is in terms of potential market access, potential services commitments, how then do you prepare for utilization? And so this is where we're partnering with others, including ITC and others, to really help to bring justice to that question that trade agreements must be about utilization, and utilization is a question of production. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joy, for very substantive comment and a strategic point of view on this very important subject. I would like to thank you for getting up so early in the morning. I know it is around 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm impressed by the energy you have and the messages you have brought to the audience. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. Now I have concluded the comments by the panelists. I'm told that we are 7 minutes behind the schedule, but let's keep going. I have pleasure to invite two Japanese enterprises who are already in the continent to share some of their experiences, concerns, or prospects for their future operation and business in Africa. First, I would like to invite Mr. Ishii-san from Hitachi Construction Machinery Company, who is Senior Vice President. Mr. Ishii, you have a floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ikegame-san, and everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to make a speech today. I would like to introduce our activity in Africa and some challenges. Next slide, please. So Hitachi has been cooperating with many mining companies in Africa. So this is one example. So copper mine in Zambia called Lumwana project, owned by Canadian company Barrick Gold. Hitachi's excavators and dump trucks have been operating in this mine like this photograph. Next, please. All the mines normally operate by so-called 24/7 regime, which means 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. And the total operating hours in a year reaches 7,000 hours sometimes. So continuous operation is very essential and important for the mines. So main components of the machines, such as pumps, motors, cylinders, and others, should be properly maintained to ensure non-stop operation. Next slide. Next, please. So to ensure this non-stop operation, Hitachi has established a remanufacturing factory in Lusaka, capital of Zambia. This factory receives from mines key components before failure and recondition them, replacing inner parts, testing performance, and putting manufacturer's guarantee and back to the mine. So by the reman activity, customer can reuse components and minimize downtime. This factory is also delivering reman parts to South Africa and Mozambique, and exporting to Europe like Finland or Ukraine as of today. We are expecting to expand this activity to other countries like Namibia, Botswana, and many other countries in Africa. Next, please. But we have some challenges to expand our businesses. So this is one example. So it takes several days for customs clearing at the border, or we should wait on the queue for ferry, and it takes more than 10 days in worst case. Moreover, sometimes goods are missed or stolen during these procedures. So we hope these obstacles will be removed. Next, please. So this is the last slide. When decarbonization becomes important issues for our society, mining companies are focusing more and more to hard rocks. We call soft rocks. Soft rock means coal, and hard rock means resources such as gold, copper, manganese, etc. And Africa is full of hard rock deposit. So under these circumstances, Hitachi is willing to further expand its activity in Africa. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ishii, sharing some experiences in Africa and also highlighting some of the problems and challenges. Let's hope that the Continental Free Trade Zone Agreement could help solve some of the problems so that the business could be expanded in Africa. Thank you very much. I would like now ask Mr. Okada from the Japan Tobacco, who is the Vice President of Japan Tobacco Corporation, to give us some of your experiences, challenges, and prospect. Thank you. You have a floor.
ありがとうございます。JT の岡田でございます。まず私から、弊社のアフリカにおけます事業についてご説明申し上げます。次お願いします。弊社はアフリカの29カ国でビジネスを展開してございまして、スーダン、エチオピア、タンザニアには自社工場を、ナイジェリア、エジプト、アルジェリアでは現地企業との委託製造を行っております。これら6カ国で製造した製品は主に大宗は内国で消費されまして、したがいまして代内部分につきましてはアフリカ以外の国から輸入しておるのが現状でございます。弊社グループは AFCFTA の運用開始を歓迎してございまして、この協定によりましてアフリカ域内での輸出拡大や拠点の拡大につながる機会だと期待してございます。次お願いします。一方で、こうした商品が国をまたいでトレードされることによりまして、外資企業にとりましては密輸と偽造というものが深刻な問題となってございます。 特にアフリカ域外からの違法品の流入が深刻な問題になってございます。こうした製品は企業の収益を減少させるのみでなく、政府の税収の減少、または犯罪組織への資金流入といった問題をはらんでございます。弊社グループはタバコの不法取引に対処するため、すでにいくつかの国との国境管理当局と協力を締結してございます。次お願いします。アフリカの地域統合が実現すれば、アフリカ大陸が一丸となってこの不法取引の問題に立ち向かう必要があるというふうには思うところではございますが、そのためにはまずはこの官民の協力が不可欠と考えます。今後予定されております AFCFTA のフェーズ2交渉で、この知的財産に関する問題も取り扱われると承知してございます。このフェーズ2交渉で不法取引の対策について議論される見込みか、また AFCFTA において不法取引を行うような対策を検討するようなタスクフォースが立ち上がるのか、本日は AFCFTA 事務局の出席法務顧問のカパ博士もご参加されておりますので、ぜひそのご検察をお伺いさせていただければと思います。弊社からのコメント、質問は以上でございます。よろしくお願いいたします。
Thank you very much, Mr. Okada. I recognize that the ambassador of South Africa, Ambassador Ngonyama, wished to take the floor to ask some questions. Ambassador Ngonyama, you have a floor.
Greetings, Madam Moderator, and thank you for the opportunity. My question is premised on the fast economic growth that Asia region realized when in the 1960s the region was rated as the poor region, but today is one of the big regions economically. South Korea was at that time rated far less than African countries like South Africa and Ghana, just to mention two. But today the two countries are by far less than South Korea. This is all attributed to the regional integration process and meshed with industrialization. This was spearheaded by Japan through blue chip companies like Sony. They enhanced digital and manufacturing skills in the region. Africa is endowed with natural resources like platinum, vanadium, nickel, copper, and manganese, suitable to make Africa region the world center for renewable energy industry that produces batteries and fuel cells and other emerging technologies. All Africa needs, Madam Moderator, is Japanese technologies and know-how. Is there any opportunity that Japan public and private sector technology experts, business strategists can directly cooperate and collaborate with African agencies like NEPAD, Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and other regional agencies to do cross-pollination of ideas to realize exactly the same that they introduced in Asia? I thank you. Arigato gozaimasu.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ngonyama. Now I'm turning to the question and answer session. First, I would like to invite Dr. Gapa for some of the questions raised during the session, as well as coming from the audience. I'm asked to answer these questions within 2 minutes. I know questions are quite a comprehensive question. Please do your best. Okay, the first question is, coming from the Japan tobacco, the second phase of the negotiation, which will touch upon the intellectual property, and he is wondering, how are you going to tackle the issue of the illegal trade when it comes to the commodities such as tobacco? And do you have a plan to establish task force? I think this is a very straightforward question. The second question is, if you wish to answer, we realize how important this free zone to be established, and it has been recognized years, but why it has been taking so long? Maybe you have already partially answered in your presentation, but this comes from the audience. Thirdly, how are you going to cooperate with REX and the African Union, REX being the building blocks for the regional integration? What are your thoughts, the cooperation with REX and AU? Please answer to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for really some truly excellent presentations. I learned a lot and I enjoyed listening to all the speakers. To the Vice President of JT, you will be aware of the plain packaging ruling in the WTO, which has changed the landscape of how tobacco products are both marketed and exported. It now, I believe, is actually easier to counterfeit packaging, right? It's now easier to counterfeit tobacco products. So you're absolutely right to say that we at the AFCFTA have to take measures to ensure that illegal trade is part of the phase 2 negotiations. I believe those talks are still ongoing. The terms of reference of the negotiations are still being discussed. But in the meantime, I'm very happy to inform you that we have a very ambitious MOU with a partner outside the AFCFTA who's helping us to ensure that all products traded within the AFCFTA are not pirated goods, are not counterfeit products. So it's a scheme that we are experimenting with. And if successful, we're going to roll it out across the entire trading area. The sensitivity, of course, you have to understand that the sovereignty on intellectual property and enforcement still remains with the member states, with the state parties. So as a secretariat, we have to be careful not to exceed our mandates and go too far beyond what the state parties have given us to do. But you're absolutely right that without addressing illegal trade, without addressing counterfeit products, without addressing pirated products, we may actually create a single market that is a market for piracy. So thank you so much for that excellent question. I'll be happy to write to you with more details about this scheme. On to why it's taken so long. How old is Africa? As I said, this idea is as old as time. But we have to understand that different African countries are moving at different paces. The AFCFTA agreement is one that has to be ratified by parliaments, right? We have Botswana, for instance. Botswana is the last member of SACU, I believe, to become a party to the AFCFTA. But they're continuing their national consultations. Parliament will consider the agreement and they will ratify. So it's important to carry the people of the continent with us. It can't just be an elite pact. And I'm very, very serious about that. If the AFCFTA is to succeed, we have to carry the continent with us. We have to carry the SMEs. We have to carry the youth. We have to carry the women. We have to carry big industry, the private sector. We have to carry the continent. We have to carry the media. So some of these consultations take longer in some countries than they do in others. So it's not always the case that all African member states are going to proceed at the same time and at the same pace. But we have 38 state parties out of a potential 55, 56. So I believe that with two-thirds of the continent behind us, we are ready to roll. On another reason as to why it has taken so long, Joy and all the wonderful speakers from the private sector explained that the nature of African trade, that we tend to trade in raw materials, right? So industrialization is important to ensuring the success of the preferential trade area. What is the point of Uganda and Zimbabwe trading bananas with each other, right? What is the point of Kenya and Ghana trading just raw shea butter with each other when we can industrialize, add value, and actually have reason to trade as a preferential trade area? Finally, on REX, if you give me 30 seconds, REX are important. They are part of what we call the acquis of the AFCFTA. We are building on the work of the EAC, of ECOWAS, of SADC, of the Central African Zone, and so on. At the same time, it's important to allow the REX to continue their work where they are advanced. It would be very unfair to say to SACU, you can no longer be a customs union because the AFCFTA eventually wants to become a customs union, hopefully by 2063. So it's a fine balance that we have to tread. On the one hand, we're building on the work of the REX, but at the same time, the REX are allowed to continue to progress at their own pace. So that really is the relationship that we see between the AFCFTA and the REX. Without the work of the REX, we would not be here today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer, although the time was beyond the 2 minutes. But thank you very much for this very comprehensive response. I have a flag from the Dr. Mayaki who would like to ask a question. If this question is directed towards the Dr. Gapa, I will give him a floor, but if it's a general question to everybody, then we might have to take it at a later stage. Dr. Mayaki, would you like to speak now? Dr. Mayaki? Okay, I don't hear from you, so we go ahead with the second one and we will take it up later. Now the question to Mr. Sato of WCO. We have two questions. One is actually coming from the Ambassador Ngoyama, successful story of Asia and ASEAN countries when it comes to regional integration, and that was a key for the industrialization and development of the region. What are the elements and the factors which really made this integration successful in Asia, and what could Africa take it up, some of the elements which could be relevant to African context? So this is number one question. Number two is Japan Tobacco would like to collaborate with you regarding this illegal tobacco trade. What can you do about that? Okay, these are the two questions. Mr. Sato, you have a floor.
ご質問していただきありがとうございます。まずは、最初の、ASEAN の発展について、解説をさせていただきます。まず、ASEAN の成功にあたってはいくつかの要因が考えられますが、まず一つ目は、新たな制度を導入するにあたって、拙速に導入するのではなくて、時間をかけて、かつ、できる地域から、導入しているということが挙げられると思います。例えば、ASEAN においてシングルウィンドウのシステムを開発していますが、シングルウィンドウ、あるいは、e コマース、電子計算地証明書、COO と言われている電子計算地証明書の制度についても、まずは、先進 ASEAN の国、シンガポールやタイ等の、先進国がまずは導入をして、その結果や失敗を踏まえて、その他の国が導入するという形で、先進的な国がやることによって、失敗も踏まえた経験を共有的にすることができる。また、それらの国が、他の国を助けることができるということが利点が挙げられます。また、もう一つの利点、ASEAN の成功の要因としては、ASEAN の中でも自立性かつ共助性の精神が挙げられると思います。ASEAN、私が自身がアジア地域のキャパシティビルディングの担当しているので、いくつかの国から支援要請があるんですけども、大抵がこういう支援をしてほしいとか、こういう、助けが欲しいとかっていう形なんですけれども、ASEAN においては、我々がこういうワークショップをするので、この分野において専門家を派遣してほしいと。まず彼ら自身がこういうことをやるので、それを助けてほしいと。ASEAN ありき、その後に助けが欲しいという形で、彼ら自身が成長しようという形の、姿勢が見られるというのが ASEAN の大きな成長の要因だと思います。で、このようなASEAN の成長、成功なんですけれども、アフリカ地域においてそのまま適用できるかというと、私はちょっとそれはそうかなと思っております。アフリカ地域におきましては、私がWCO の会議において、アフリカからの参加者を時々見るんですけれども、彼らはどの国の出身かにかかわらず、お互いのことをブラザーというふうに呼び合っていて、まさしくワンアフリカなんだなと思うんですけれども、やっぱり ASEAN の国の成功というのは、やはりどこか遠い国の成功、ASEAN のアフリカの成功ではなく、遠い国の地域の成功という形で、よその国の成功ですので、やっぱりそれを自分たちが成功できるということに直接つなげられるというかというと、また難しいんではないかなと思っております。そうではなくて、アフリカ地域の成功は、やはりアフリカ地域で達成しなければいけない。アフリカ諸国の自分の力で達成しなければいけないので、まずはアフリカの域内において成功例を蓄積していくということが大事なんじゃないかなと思っております。そういう観点から、WCO の JICA プロジェクトは、TICAD 7においても、言及されているんですけども、アフリカにおいて持続的な研修制度の設立の、成功例ですと考えておりますので、このプログラムを積極的に進めることによって、アフリカ諸国の事実的な成長を促すことができると考えています。でもう一点の日本タバコさんからの、ご質問なんで、ご提案なんですけども、WCO においてもやっぱりタバコというのはご説明がありました通り、最も密造あるいは密輸のリスクが高いものの一つとして WCO も認識しております。そして、最優先課題の一つとしておりまして、WCO においても、グローバルオペレーションという形で、すべての税関に、世界各国の税関に呼びかけて、短期間では2ヶ月間、 限ってタバコの一斉取り締まりを行うというようなグローバルオペレーションを開始しております。グローバルオペレーション、グリフォンという名前でオペレーションをやってるんですけども、タバコのオペレーションを実施しておりまして、我々としても、タバコの密造、密については、やはり危惧を持っておりますし、それらの違法な資金が、テロリストに流れていくということも懸念しておりますので、まずは我々としても、タバコの密造というのが第一、最優先課題の一つでありますし、民間、日本タバコさんをはじめとした各、タバコ産業とも協力をしていきたいと考えております。すいません、長くなりました。失礼します。
どうもありがとうございました。Thank you very much. Now I would like to pose some questions to Mr. Miyamoto. Two questions. First question relates to the similar one as the Ambassador Ngoyama raised to WCO. Regarding the success story of Asia and particularly ASEAN countries in terms of the quality infrastructure development, what are the key, how they could cooperate and make infrastructure development so effectively done? If there is any elaboration that could be shared, we'll be very grateful, Mr. Miyamoto. Another question is, yes, through the JIDA, the association is encouraging more Japanese enterprises and companies coming into Africa. How can you really encourage them to come to Africa? Many countries are a bit reluctant. How could they get the first step to the continent? And in order for Japanese companies coming into Africa, what are the African government should do in order to attract Japanese companies coming to the continent for the trade and investment? Mr. Miyamoto, thank you very much for your cooperation. 2 minutes, but please do your best to answer to these very important questions. Mr. Miyamoto, you have...
はい、ありがとうございます。まず最初のご質問の ASEAN 諸国とのうまくいった例について申し上げますと、早くから地域全体を共同体として捉えてですね、そこの連結性の強化と、2つ目は経済成長のための貿易投資促進と、3つ目はその防災感染症対策等の観点からの人間の安全保障、環境の持続性の確保、この3つを柱に支援に取り組んできたところであります。例えばメコン地域で言えば東西経済回廊、南部経済回廊等の開発を軸にやってきたわけでありまして、さまざまな角度からハード、ソフトの両面で支援してまいりました。その結果、タイ、ベトナム、カンボジア、ラオスでの1人当たりの GDP が2000年から2020年にかけて3倍から8倍程度の成長を遂げるということに貢献できたのではないかと思っています。アフリカにおいてはさまざまな回廊開発にも私どもご協力しているし、また政府としても、日本政府もですね、さまざまにマスタープランの作りにご協力していると思うんですが、まだアフリカ全体を網羅するところまでいかないので、この辺をもっと大きくしてですね、回廊が全体をつなぐ、地域をつなぐ一つの経済圏とするということで、産業ポテンシャルを広く上げていくことができればですね、地域活性化につながるのではないかというふうに思っています。2つ目のご質問の、日本企業が投資としてですね、投資を含めてアフリカでの参入のためには何をしてもらいたいのかということについて申し上げますと、一番大事に私たち民間企業を思ってますのは、やはり進出した場合にどうしても安全な環境でですね、安定したビジネスが行えるということが重要だということであります。そのためには正常の不安さがないこと、それから感染症伝染病対策がきちんとできていて、保健衛生の確保ができていること、そして公正な契約、取引確保ができているといった課題がありまして、これはなかなか企業だけでは難しい問題ですので、ぜひ日本企業に、日本政府にもお願いしているわけでありますけれども、そういったビジネス環境のさらなる整備を求める声が民間企業からたくさん出てきています。やはりどうしても特に PPP 等で出ていくということになりますと、その投資した資金をどうやって回収するのか、その回収がどう確保できるのかということが一番大事なことになりますので、そういった意味でのその環境整備についてですね、できるだけ具体的にお示しいただけると、より参入がしやすくなる、進出ができるのではないかというふうに考えます。ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Miyamoto-san, particularly for very concrete knowledge and wisdom coming from your long-standing experience in the region and how to also help Africa to reach the continental development through the agreement. Thank you very much, Mr. Miyamoto. Now I have a question to Mr. Sugano. Based on your experience in JETRO, who deal with not only Africa, but the rest of the world, from the global point of view, what does this really mean, Africa Free Trade Agreement? Is it not going to be a threat to the world, or how does this mean? Is it a contribution to the global economy? How do you see it?
I think it's a necessary piece of the global economy. I think this, especially AFCFTA, can be important for two things. One is the trade, import substitution of bulky stuff in bulky products in Africa. Import substitution has a bad press, due to government-led initiatives in the 1970s. But if you look at, Africa now, you see the cement factories, beer factories, all those things popping up, and some things like the iPhones, for example, they can only be produced from the mass scale in southern China. But the heavier the thing is, the more parts you have, it becomes more expensive to travel across borders. And Africa isn't endowed with the best transportation and the links in the world, but that can actually be an advantage to a very enterprising private sector entrepreneurs. Mr. Aliko Dangote being the typical example, but you have Japanese affiliated companies, such as Kansai Paint, Olam, all of that. That's one. Two is also, I'd like to point out the importance of adding bits and pieces of stuff together. And automobiles is a typical example of that. So we already have South African car kits from Toyota being exported to Kenya to be assembled. And something similar is going to happen in Ghana in near time sometime soon. And all of that actually not only adds employment to Africa, but it actually makes things more efficient, reasonable, and cheaper for the global trade as well. And all that AFCF is doing is trying to help global trade, African trade, come to the status where it should originally have been all the time. So it's definitely a good thing. And there will be Japanese companies who will be participating in that process as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sugano. You just confirmed that there is nothing better than the continental agreement to go ahead. It will be a win-win situation, both African continent and also global economy. So thank you very much for emphasizing this aspect. Thank you. Now, the last question I will have is to the Madame Kategekwa, the UNDP. I know UNDP has all offices in African countries, and you have such access to the government. UNDP, of course, is to help the process of the integration and also have a good communication method between the countries. So when there is some problem in terms of the border operation problems or two countries not cooperating with each other, how can UNDP facilitate good negotiation to come up with a concrete result?
Well, thank you very much. I think that the question you raise has clear answers from other UN agencies in light of the role of institutions like UNCTAD, for example, that are specifically trade-related. UNDP looks at the ecosystem from a development perspective. And in the spirit of the One UN approach, I mean, institutions like that have come up with, for example, the NTB reporting mechanism, the non-tariff barrier reporting mechanism, where information can be shared in real time. And the idea is that this then goes to the critical relevant officials for resolution. But UNDP has a different role in supporting the negotiations, understanding well, of course, that the negotiations are ultimately for member states and that there's a sanctity with which that is guarded. But I think in terms of preparing the implementation of the outcome of the negotiations, this is where UNDP's presence on the ground is particularly useful. The other particular part is around women in trade. And Bettina spoke very eloquently about the fact that you must take everybody along. And so UNDP has been requested to conduct national consultations across all of the African countries for what women want to see out of this AFCFTA protocol on women in trade. I think it will be the first time in the world that there is a protocol that speaks specifically to women issues in trade and brings into account, the trade obligations into that landscape. And so consultations are ongoing across various African countries, which will reflect the ecosystem challenges that women face. And then the lawyers can find how to replicate that into legal speak, into trade speak. But I think just to sum up, UNDP is at the front line of ensuring, working with partners on the ground to ensure that we don't spectate at the opportunities in the AFCFTA. Rather, we tool women and youth to utilize these opportunities. That is where our contribution is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joy, for a very important role of the multilateral organization, which has a comparative advantage how to facilitate the agenda forward. So thank you very much, all of you, for excellent responses to the question raised. Now I'm going back to Dr. Mayaki, who wanted to take the floor to ask some of the questions. Dr. Mayaki, can I invite you now?
Thank you, Miyako. I think this was an extraordinary panel, extremely rich. I just have 3 points. The first one is the senior head of Hitachi spoke about queues at borders. We, as the African Union Development Agency, implement one-stop border post all over the continent. We have a methodology, we work with JICA, we have established more than 37 and will continue. So one-stop border post will be a key instrument in order to allow an optimal flow of goods, of people, but it's fundamental for the application, implementation of the CFTA. Point number 2, in PIDA PAP2, PIDA is our strategic continental framework on infrastructure. The priority we are given is to regional corridors. We are looking at regional corridors as spaces of economic density. So it's like special economic zones where infrastructure will need to be built, whether it is fiber optic fiber, roads, etc. So in these corridors, given the constraints that we face with infrastructure projects will be maximized. So it's important to flag the issue of regional corridors in the implementation of the CFTA. The same thing happened in East Asia. Corridors are extremely important. And the third point is we need to take into account the fact that 80% of Africans who have a job, are working in the informal economy in micro, small, and medium enterprises. And they move as much as they can. And they try to evade non-tariff barriers. We have a lot to learn from them. So this is why we have a program with, partnerships with several banks. We need to learn from them. And medium enterprises, just like it happened in Japan and Germany, will really be the motor of our economic integration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mayaki. I'm glad the comments are comments and it wasn't a question because we are against the time. I think that Dr. Mayaki made a very important point. Firstly, about one-stop border post issues addressed to Mr. Ishii, and also the role of PIDA and corridor concept to Mr. Miyamoto, and then finally the issue of the informal sector, the importance and the vital energy of and the power of the economy going on. We should not underestimate that. And also the role of SMEs, which is a foundation for the economy in Africa. So thank you very much for this very valuable comments, Dr. Mayaki. Now, I am going to discuss, or rather give the opportunity to ADC, in cooperation with the ADC Trade and Investment Committee. We have opportunity to listen to the ambassadors and the representatives regarding the regional economic communities who are the building blocks for the continental integration. And we would like to hear where we are in each regions, what are the achievements, what are the challenges. So now, first, I would like to invite Ambassador of Cameroon, Ambassador Pierre Unjenge, and we'd like to hear what's going on in Central Africa. You have a floor.
Thank you. I decided to address during my presentation two specific issues that seem to me of fundamental importance in the context of our forum and the agenda of the day. Those issues are, first of all, the challenges to be taken up for an effective establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area, some of which offer opportunities for cooperation with Japan. And the second issue is the specific situation of the Central African sub-region. Now, talking about the challenges, I must say by and large that we can identify five main challenges. The first one is political, the second one is legal, the second one is infrastructural, and Dr. Mayaki has just spoken about that right now. The fourth one is financial, and the security challenges, I mean the fight against terrorism and the transfrontier security, and finally the health challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic. Those are the challenges. Next, please. Next. Now, s'agissant particulièrement de la sous-région, on note que l'une des premières étapes la première étape est la mise en place de la ZECA, donc vise l'établissement d'une liste de concessions tarifaires. Ce démantèlement tarifaire qui vise à, entre autres, à produire et à consommer africain est entré en vigueur le 1er janvier 2021. Donc, en tant qu'union douanière, la CEMAC a été la première région d'Afrique à transmettre en septembre 2019 à la Commission de l'Union africaine sa liste de concessions tarifaires avec certains produits, n'est-ce pas, qui ont été bannis de la... pour protéger les industries de transformation naissantes. Next, please. Donc maintenant, en ce qui concerne spécifiquement la région d'Afrique centrale, il faut déjà dire que tous les pays de la sous-région ont signé et ratifié l'accord, sauf le Burundi qui est le dernier signataire. Donc, les pays de la CEAC se doivent d'élaborer leur stratégie nationale et préciser les produits qui peuvent être donc compétitifs sur le marché extérieur et les chaînes de valeur à mettre en place. Voilà, en ce qui concerne par exemple le Cameroun et le Congo, qui sont les seuls à avoir élaboré cette stratégie. On note par exemple, next please, pour le Cameroun, il s'agit de l'agro-industrie, l'industrie du bois, le textile, industrie lourde. Pour le Gabon, il y a les produits ligneux, donc les meubles en bois tropicaux, les dérivés de l'huile de palme, le manioc, café et le cacao. Pour le Tchad, le coton et l'élevage bovin, alors que pour le Congo, l'industrie du bois et le ciment. Next, please. Toutefois, les principaux obstacles auxquels les États sont confrontés sont l'insuffisance de l'offre commerciale des marchandises et des services pour tirer profit du marché libéralisé. Il s'agit donc, n'est-ce pas, de l'augmentation de la production. La faiblesse des infrastructures, Dr Meya qui en a parlé, l'existence et la persistance des obstacles non tarifaires et d'un environnement des affaires à améliorer, un secteur, n'est-ce pas, dans lequel le Japon intervient déjà. Donc, afin de pouvoir tirer pleinement profit de la ZLECAf, les États de la sous-région se doivent d'entreprendre des réformes importantes, notamment en ce qui concerne le développement des capacités productives à travers l'industrialisation et le développement des chaînes de valeur, ainsi que le développement de la production, la distribution d'énergie à des coûts appropriés pour les unités de production industrielle. Voilà, mesdames et messieurs, chers amis, ce que je voulais dire en ce qui concerne l'Afrique centrale. Et je vais conclure en disant que les entreprises japonaises, les entreprises privées doivent considérer la zone comme une opportunité et se demander ce qu'elles peuvent faire pour la mise en place de cette zone. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Unjenge, for very comprehensive report on what's going on in Central Africa. Good news is that it's only one country signed yet. The rest are all signed, if I'm not mistaken. And also good messages to the Japanese business people. There was a presentation in French, and at the end of this session, we will be preparing also in English version and Japanese one. It will be set in the website so that those who missed the point, you will have opportunity to look at the document and catch up with this. And Ambassador, it's so important that the Japanese business community has a direct information coming from your country and your colleagues. And we really appreciate this opportunity. You made a direct presentation on what's going on in the region. Thank you very much indeed. With the same spirit, I would like to now invite Ambassador of Republic of Guinea, Ambassador Shira, to talk about what's going on in the West African region. You have a floor, sir. Ambassador, we can't hear you. Can you switch the microphone on, please? We can't hear you, please.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
now we can hear you. Your beautiful voice, please.
Ok. Bien, merci beaucoup. Hein. Je vous remercie très sincèrement. Compte tenu de l'impératif de temps, je vais donc me focaliser essentiellement sur la CEDEAO, hein, dû au fait que la pertinence des différents intervenants ont permis de développer beaucoup de sujets relatifs à cette question. Eh bien, tout d'abord, c'est pour moi un très grand plaisir de me trouver parmi vous à cette importante rencontre sur les perspectives régionales de développement de l'Afrique à travers la 3e édition du Forum Japon-Afrique organisé conjointement par le Bureau de représentation extérieure pour l'Asie de la Banque africaine de développement et le corps diplomatique africain accrédité à Tokyo, et dont l'objectif, bien entendu, est de promouvoir l'Afrique en tant que destination d'investissement, de commerce et d'affaires. Slide. Permettez-moi de remercier très sincèrement les organisateurs de cet important événement pour l'opportunité qui m'est offerte de m'exprimer sur une thématique si cruciale et qui constitue, à n'en pas douter, un enjeu de développement du continent africain. Comme vous le savez, depuis les premières heures de l'indépendance des États africains, l'intégration a été rêvée par bon nombre de nos dirigeants afin d'apporter une réponse commune aux enjeux politiques, économiques et sociaux du continent et garantir ainsi l'harmonisation des politiques de développement, gage certain d'un développement durable pour le continent. C'est également à cette faveur que, bien entendu, l'Union africaine fut créée pour ainsi soutenir cet ambitieux projet pour le continent et en faire un acteur majeur sur l'échiquier international. Il convient donc de souligner, pour justement se focaliser sur le cas de la CEDEAO, que sur le continent, la grande majorité des populations étaient essentiellement tournées vers l'autoconsommation. Aucune dynamique réelle de marché ne pouvait dès lors soutenir un projet régional d'intégration. C'est dans ce contexte particulier qu'il a été créé au milieu des années 70 les communautés économiques régionales au rang desquelles figure la CEDEAO, qui a été lancée donc en 1975 et qui aujourd'hui, il faut le reconnaître, a beaucoup évolué dans la mise en œuvre de ces différentes directives. Bon, au début, comme vous le savez, la CEDEAO a été beaucoup plus sollicitée comme étant un instrument de gestion politique dans la région, ce qui a conduit, bien entendu, à l'extension de son mandat par les États membres à travers 2 protocoles, notamment celui relatif au mécanisme de prévention, de gestion et de résolution des conflits, de maintien de la paix et de la sécurité, et celui relatif au protocole additionnel sur la démocratie et la bonne gouvernance. Slide. Alors, bien que la gestion des crises ait mobilisé une part très importante des activités ou des énergies de la CEDEAO, il est incontestable aujourd'hui qu'elle se positionne comme un leader dans le paysage africain en termes d'intégration, en ce sens qu'elle a réussi à se rapprocher d'une phase très importante de ce processus, qui est celle de la mise en place d'une union douanière dans chaque communauté économique régionale, reposant d'abord sur une zone de libre-échange, puis sur des tarifs extérieurs communs. Ceci démontre que les pays de la région ont plus que jamais besoin de la CEDEAO en tant que structure régionale économique pour les soutenir dans leur lutte contre la pauvreté dans un contexte de mondialisation de l'économie et d'ouverture des marchés, rendant l'activité économique fortement compétitive. Bon, la promotion de l'intégration de manière générale en Afrique passe aussi nécessairement en termes de nombre de pays. C'est ainsi que la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine joue un rôle en étant la plus grande zone de libre-échange du monde depuis la création de l'OMC. Actuellement, à titre d'exemple, les exportations intra-africaines représentent environ 17% du total des exportations continentales. L'augmentation de cette part devrait permettre d'accroître la valeur ajoutée, de contribuer à la création d'emplois et d'augmenter les revenus. Donc, à l'intérieur de cet État, de cet espace qui est la CEDEAO, l'accent doit être mis sur une gestion concertée, plus efficace, donc moins coûteuse des dynamiques de peuplement, des ressources en eau, des systèmes de transport, de la lutte contre les pandémies, etc., conformément à la vision panafricaine d'une Afrique intégrée, prospère et pacifique. Pour terminer, Pour terminer, le Japon, grâce à la force de son secteur privé, pourrait ainsi contribuer davantage à sophistiquer les initiatives déjà entreprises sur le continent avec des acteurs économiques débordant d'idées et de projets pour l'Afrique. Ces actions devraient notamment se concrétiser au travers de la mobilisation et l'investissement du secteur privé japonais dans les initiatives portées par les acteurs économiques et l'État, mais aussi grâce à une meilleure redéfinition du partenariat collaboratif et la valorisation de bons procédés entre les opérateurs économiques africains et ceux du Japon. Pour le cas de la République de Guinée que je représente, en vue de permettre aux communautés économiques régionales d'exécuter pleinement leur feuille de route, il devient capital de garantir un échange des connaissances, de l'information et des statistiques de base au niveau de la région afin d'inciter des réformes structurelles profondes et dynamiser davantage la coopération entre l'Afrique et les partenaires importants comme le Japon. Enfin, l'Afrique et son précieux partenaire qui est le Japon ont tout à y gagner en tirant pleinement profit des opportunités qu'offre un partenariat bâti autour d'une confiance mutuelle et d'une amitié construite depuis les décennies entre nos États, et ce, en intensifiant les actions pour l'émergence d'une intégration régionale forte, dynamique, autonome et disposant des voies et moyens nécessaires pour réussir l'agenda d'un développement durable et garantir le repositionnement du continent en tant qu'acteur incontournable dans les échanges et la définition des politiques au niveau mondial. Je vous remercie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shira, for comprehensive presentation, what's going on in the West Africa region, particularly how ECOWAS is progressing. Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to invite the representative of SADC, and being as one of the RECs, we would like to hear from Dr. Lutaiwa, what's going on in SADC region. You have a floor, sir. Can't hear you, please. Can you put the microphone on, please? Okay, good.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and it's a very pleasure for me to be here today to make a presentation regarding the regional integration, particularly on the focus on the private sector. Next slide, please. In terms of the private sector arrangement in the region, I can say the private sector, in terms of the organization, they are still at the infant stage. We have just recently launched the SADC Business Council, which is the umbrella organization for the private sector in the region. Prior to that, we never used to have any form of representation for the private sector in the region, and they're still very thin on the ground in terms of the human power that are available to the secretariat. And the current secretariat is still in interim and being hosted in South Africa. They are yet to move in Gaborone, where they're supposed to be based. So in that connection, you find their traditional roles of the private sector that we're expecting them to play has not been sufficient to that extent. They're being expected to be the voice of the business, to be the ones to talk what are the concerns that the business is facing in the region and what should be done to address those kind of constraints. And second is lobbying. The extent of lobbying has been very minimal because there's no regional representation. But yes, currently with the launch of the SADC Business Council and with the new move of ensuring that we have the mechanism of cooperation between the SADC region and the private sector, we hope they'll be able now to lobby in various issues. But currently, mostly the lobbying has been based at the national state level, where each private sector tend to lobby based on the willingness of their government. But also the issue of the private sector to assist them in terms of the equip them in terms of capacity in consultation on making various policies has been very minimal, as I've indicated earlier, simply because the representation has been very minimal among themselves. So you find for them to be really able to benefit from various policies, the private sector and the policies like trade industrialization need to work together. it's private sector who are really implementing these policies. And you can see I've just highlighted a number of issues which are emanating from each partner. Like for the trade policy, we expect the growth, we accept these jobs, and we accept wealth creation, also as well for the private sector. Can we move to the next slide, please? Now, on this, I'm trying to cover what is expected or how do the private sector supposed to participate in the implementation of CFTA. There are a number of categories that we are looking forward that the private sector should be able to participate. One being through their organization association or industrial association, like the one we have said now, we have the SADC Business Council. They should be able to produce the various research papers that can be more policy informing. They should be able to be involved in social dialogue. They should be able to do the analysis in terms of the trade and how it is it faring and what can be done. Also, they should be able to participate in the implementation of various monitoring and the reporting of various trade agreements. Next slide, please. Through their participation in the implementation of CFTA on the angle that I've mentioned, these are the benefits that we are foreseeing that the other private sector should be able to gain. One is to enhance competition, both at the industrial and at enterprise level, since we do understand that the competition will increase and the market will be broadened. The product will not only be purchased or traded simply because it's being produced in countries or in country. It will be based on the quality. So the issue of quality will lead to the competition. Then we expect promotion of innovation. We do believe the investors who will be coming in the region will come up with technology that will improve innovation. Also, opportunity to widen the opportunity to manufacture goods, take the advantage of the market access at continental level, and ease of business through tariff liberalization. Next slide, please, for the finalization. All this, what we are seeing for the private sector to participate in the CFTA. For the region, we are focusing on the three areas. That's agro-processing, mining, and the pharmaceutical. So whatever that will be complementing or supporting the implementation of CFTA, we'll be focusing on the three areas. Thank you very much for your attention, and let me stop there. Merci.
Thank you very much, representative of SADC, Mr. Lutaiwa. And also the emphasis of the role of private sector vital for the Africa's Continental Free Trade Agreement. And at the same time, the voice and the requirement of private sector need to be heard by the government who will make the right policy choice to advance this agenda. So thank you very much for the emphasis of the role of private sector. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Mr. Dawale, who is the president of Djibouti Chamber of Commerce and Industry, but he's also the president of the Pan-Africa Chamber of Commerce and Industry. But I would like you to speak more about your experience as a part of East Africa region, because this is the region we would like to know what's going on what are the issues, what are the challenges, and what are the achievements. You have a floor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la modératrice. Je voudrais aussi remercier les ambassadeurs ici présents et les auditeurs et auditrices qui nous écoutent. Je suis très honoré de participer à cette conférence pour que nous puissions échanger sur le Continental Free Trade Agreement dont on est en train de discuter. Je vais être très bref parce qu'il faudrait que je puisse donner quelques chiffres. Les chiffres les plus importants est la population africaine en général qui est de 1,34 milliard de statistiques de 2020. L'interconnexion ou le commerce intra-africain est de 17% aujourd'hui. Et nous espérons avoir justement, pour pouvoir mettre en place des stratégies de réflexion, comment faire avancer surtout les barrières douanières et tout ce qui va avec. Là où nous souhaitions une collaboration étroite avec nos amis du Japon et de pouvoir accompagner les différents gouvernements, accompagner dans les infrastructures, dans l'énergie, tout ce qui va avec l'eau, la télécommunication. C'est cela dont les États ont besoin. Si je parle au nom de l'Afrique, je dirais, et de la Chambre de commerce panafricaine que je représente, non seulement celle de Djibouti, mais celle de la Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. Nous avons aussi besoin d'apprendre ou de suivre le rythme de l'industrialisation du Japon, qui est la formation professionnelle de base. Là aussi, il y a matière à échanger. Ce qui est pour nous très important en tant que secteur privé, ce sont les infrastructures dans son ensemble qui doivent être mises sur pied. Et une fois que les différents États mettent sur pied tout ce que je suis en train de citer, il y a le coût de production qu'il faudra baisser, puisqu'on parle de l'industrialisation, de la politique commerciale et de l'avancement du secteur privé. Donc tout cela doit être soigné en partenariat avec du privé comme du public africain. Si je reviens en Afrique, je prends l'exemple du livestock ou de produits animaliers ou des animaux qui sont disponibles en Afrique. Aujourd'hui, l'Éthiopie est, par exemple, le premier, je dirais, réserve africain en termes de bétail. Mais la valeur ajoutée n'est pas encore là, puisqu'ils envoient des produits, des animaux vivants dans les pays du Golfe, comme le reste, je dirais, du monde. Il y a matière aussi à développer sur la transmission, je dirais, de technologies pour tout ce qui est véhicules que nous utilisons en Afrique. Vous savez très bien que les véhicules japonais sont les plus demandés en Afrique. Donc, on a besoin de chaînes pour qu'on puisse faire monter en Afrique, comme vous avez si bien fait. Je pense que la compagnie Toyota a fait dernièrement une usine d'assemblage au Ghana. Donc, je pense que tout cela servirait à mettre en place une stratégie de mise sur pied. Si je prends l'interconnexion entre les pays africains doivent être le plus rapidement possible mise sur pied. Comment? C'est de mettre un standard où le programme, le projet, l'application de la ZLECAf puisse donner une opportunité de mise sur pied. Ce sont donc des choses concrètes dont le secteur privé a besoin pour qu'il puisse avancer. Aujourd'hui, après le Covid, nous avons besoin de travailler en collaboration avec le secteur privé japonais à travers nos représentants diplomatiques pour que nous puissions faire avancer, je dirais, l'industrialisation et l'interconnexion des pays africains. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Dawale, for your expose. And thank you for your comment beyond the Djibouti experience and the East Africa experience, but going to Pan-African issues. And you have pointed out a number of the key issues which are well received. I noted particularly only 17% for the inter-Africa trade is going on. We really need to increase that. That was a point I specifically picked it up. All other comments are very well taken. Thank you. Now, the last speaker, but not least important, is Mr. Diop, who is the president of African Commission Confederation of Moroccan Enterprises, Morocco being a part of North African region. We'll appreciate also some of the experience can be highlighting what's going on in North Africa region. You have a floor, sir.
Thank you very much, moderator. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are and all protocols observed, as we say. I'm really happy to be here to to represent the private sector with my friend Dawale from Djibouti, with whom we have good cooperation, and happy to talk about three main points. I will highlight how FCFTA will help integration and in focusing in the North African region, because I think we have talked a lot about it, but it's important also, as we are in a Japan-Africa session, to see how Japanese companies can jump in and help that integration. And last but not least, I'll focus on some few challenges. I think everybody is happy to say that Africa is really the next frontier, the land of promise, everything we say. But still, there are a lot of challenges and issues. And one of the challenges and issue is how to reinforce the integration to the regional economic communities. When we talk about North Africa, I think North Africa is one of the less integrated area in the continent because of many issues, specifically political, but not only, even infrastructure. And one of the things that North African countries have done is that as they were not integrated in the North, they worked a lot with other African countries. So we have some countries and private sector like in Morocco or in Tunisia who have built real connections across the continent. And now you know that Morocco is the second investor across the continent. And today, AFCFTA will be a real blessing to help to integrate this region, because we are obliged to talk together, to work together, to take the most advantage of the new continental free trade area. And I think that in taking into account those 2 points, the fact that these North African companies have invested a lot across the continent, and that there is still room to integrate North Africa, I think there is place for Japanese companies to come in, to take profit of AFCFTA and to see how to build joint ventures with these Moroccan companies or Tunisian companies to invest across Africa, because the links have been already connected, and it's easier to speak to companies that know already Africa, know already how it works, and know already how to deal with issues like logistics across the continent. And that's the way how Japanese companies need to break into the continent. And for me, it's something very important. And in that area, they will help also to face some important issues. We have talked about industrialization, which is the main point today in Africa, and which is key to implement AFCFTA, because without products to exchange between us, we will not improve the rate of intra-African trade. We will continue to import products from the continent. And I'm very happy to hear this week that Toyota is creating a company in Ghana. And that's how it must work, to implement plans in the regions, in the economic region, and to create jobs and to help to build product, not for just having low-cost product, but creating real products made in Africa for the Africans. And that's very important. And I think also one of the participants have focused on that. The help can be also in infrastructure, because industrialization is the point, but logistic, transport, and infrastructure is also an issue. And if we want to reinforce trade together, we need really to invest in those areas to create real corridor, real infrastructure connection. And Mr. Dawale talked about it. We need to connect the different African region, and to connect it, we need to really put in place corridors. It's road corridors, it's also port connections, it's airports connection. So it's important to do all this bridge between the African region to make this continental free trade area be a reality. And to finish, I will say that it's important for Japanese company to build with Africans and also with a focus for. So that will be my last point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diop. This was very interesting. You mentioned that North Africa is less or least integrated to African continent, and yet Morocco is the second investor in the continent, and that is to be followed by all other African countries. And at the same time, as Japan being the economy in the Asian region, how Japan has helped industrialization of Asian region, how this has been done can be also done in Africa. Let's make factory Africa, just like Japan tried to make factory Asia. And this is how the industrialization should go. All Japan and the African countries will have a win-win situation to have a better place in the global economy. With that, I am now going to invite Mr. Hada. Mr. Hada is the Chief Secretariat of the Japan-Africa Business Council, or Japan Business Council for Africa, to voice the Japanese business sector and private sectors, how they are expecting to Africa and what are their visions for the future. Mr. Hada, you have a floor.
はい、池上さんありがとうございます。改めましてビジネス教育会代表して今日もお話しさせていただきます羽田と申します。私からは3点、こちらのスライドのようにちょっと書かせていただいた3点ほどコメントをさせていただきたいと思います。1つ目です。1つ目は皆さんにお願いしたいんですが、アフリカの民間セクターっていうのをしっかり巻き込んでいただきたいと思っています。今日のセッションでも ASEAN のお話っていうのがたくさん紹介されましたけれども、私は ASEAN の成功の要因っていうのは各国の地元の企業が主役を担ったことなんだろうなというふうに考えています。ASEAN という大きな傘の下でアジアの各国の企業がそれぞれ販売やマーケティング、製造拠点というのをいろんな国に分散して、それをそれぞれの国の比較優位に基づいて戦略的にきちっと選んで展開していくことで、時には競合とバチバチ競合しながら切磋琢磨して一緒に大きくなったっていう物語が一番の ASEAN の成功要因だと思っています。ですので、ぜひアフリカ大陸全体の統合を目指すこの AFCFTA の動きの中でも、アフリカ各国の民間企業を主役に添えて、彼らのエネルギーっていうのをぐっと引き出すような動き、アジェンダっていうのをしっかりと考えていただいて実行していただくっていうのが非常に大事だと思います。そのムーブメントが見えてくると、日本企業っていうのはそこに熱と匂いを感じてしっかりと投資をするとかジョイントベンチャーを組むとか、そういった動きを具体的にやってくれます。ですのでそこをまずすごく大事にしてもらいたいなと思ってます。ここでエピソードなんですけれども、この ASEAN のことが頭にあったので、私もアフリカに出張行って何人かのアフリカの経営者にお会いしたことがあるんですが、その方に AFCFTA ってどう思いますか、経営者としてお答えくださいってご質問をしたら、絶対にチャンスだと、自分の国に閉じこもっていなくていいんだと、レックス、アフリカ大陸全体、そしてアフリカの外に出るために自分たちを鍛える絶好のチャンスなんだから、これはまたとないチャンスですと。だから俺たちは成立を見越してもういろんな国に、自分の国以外のところに拠点をもう構えてるぞということをおっしゃってまして、だからこそグローバル企業の先輩である日本企業と早くつながって一緒に勉強したい、そんなコメントも残してくれてます。アフリカの多分民間企業の熱っていうのは非常に熱いものがあるんだと思いますので、先ほど池上さんからも大使にお願いがありましたけれども、そういったものもどんどん日本の企業、我々を通じて日本の企業の皆さんにお伝えできればなというふうに思っています。そして2つ目です。そういった民間企業がどんどん動いていくっていう動きの中で、やはりこれとしっかり連動させて 地域をどう発展させていくかという地域投資、地域への直接投資ですね。リージョナル FDI という多分言い方になるんだと思うんですけど、が非常に重要だと思います。これはJIDA の宮本会長がおっしゃってましたけど、ASEAN の成功ってやはり一つ国同士をしっかりとつなぐためのインフラ整備っていうのを重点的に先行してやったことだというふうにおっしゃってました。地域全体を見据えてやったこと、そしてそれが大事なので AFCFTA の地域統合が成功するのはインフラにかかっているとも過言ではないというところまで踏み込んだコメントをいただいています。まずは地域経済統合共同体のところですね、レックス、そしてアフリカ全体が輸送とエネルギーのネットワークでちゃんとつながっていくと、そこに企業のビジネスネットワークが乗ってきます。そして地域全体のバリューチェーンが大きくなって、そのことがまたアフリカ大陸に外から海外直接投資がどんどん入ってくるっていう好循環を生むと思いますので、ぜひこういう視点でいろんな施策を考えていただければなと思ってます。すでにマイキーさんから言及ありましたように、ワンストップボーダーポストとかアウダネパットの方で、アフリカ開発銀行と一緒にやってらっしゃいますアフリカインフラ開発プログラム PIDA ってやつですねとか、そういったものをイニシアチブがたくさん走ってます。そしてエネルギー、インフラ、ICT などのロードマップっていうのを示されてます。もちろんこういったイニシアチブを走らせるためには、現実問題としてはどうやってバンカブルなプロジェクトにしていくか、民間企業が入って大損こかないようなプロジェクトにしていくかっていうところを考えていくと、各国に痛みを伴うような法規制を変えてくれとか、契約が本当に履行されるのか保証してくれとか、そういった非常に難しい問題が出てくるかもしれないです。でそこに世銀やアフリカ会議の皆さんが知恵を貸して一緒にやろうよというふうにやってくれてはいますけど、きっとこれはすごく時間かかる話なんだろうなというふうには思ってます。最後の3点目は、でもアフリカの皆さんがこうやって時間がかかる課題に真正面で向き合いますと言ってるんですから、日本の官民もしっかり正面から向き合ってやりましょうということを、私はこのビジネス協議会を見てる人間としてしっかりと再認識しなきゃいけないなと思いました。このフォーラムはアフリカ開発銀行、そして年末に行われる日アフリカ官民経済フォーラムは経済産業省、そして TICAD は外務省がやりますけれども、それぞれが独立した動きをするのではなくて、アフリカ自身が向き合っているこの長期の課題っていうものに真正面で日本の官民が向き合い続けるっていう仕掛けをどうやって作っていくかっていうのは、これは非常に重要な宿題を今日もらったなと思ってます。ですので早速今日の結果をですね、花尻さん単なるやりました報告に終わらせずに、今後どうやってこの議論の内容を詰めていくか、使っていくかっていうことをまたこれ終わったらぜひ議論させていただきたいなと今日は思いました。以上です。すいません、長くなりました。
どうもありがとうございます、Hadaさん。Thank you very much, Mr. Hada, who wrapped up so well. My friends and colleagues and brothers and sisters, we are to conclude this session. Instead of me summarizing what was discussed and so on, you can look at website all what was discussed and what are very important issues that you can tackle every day's operation. But instead, I would like to propose to adopt recommendations by this third Japan-Africa Business Forum 2021, 5 Tokyo principles on integrated Africa for enhancing mutual trade and investment between Japan and Africa. Number 1, AFCFTA will contribute to major economic growth and development in Africa. It increases not only trade investment among African countries, but also business opportunities for Japanese private sector in Africa. Number 2, to this end, the government of each African country should make its utmost effort to realize the principle of AFCFTA in concrete terms and in specific fields, including custom regulations, border operations such as one-stop border posts, quality infrastructure development, energy and IT, trade, finance, and so on. Regional FDI, which was referred to Mr. Hada, should be developed based on the successful experience of ASEAN countries, which would enhance regional trade and investment, especially at the regional level. Japanese companies should consider not only bilateral investment, but also investment beyond the national borders, leading to regional trade and investment. Number 3, in order for Japanese companies to be able to engage in AFCFTA, African governments need to focus on improving business environment conducive to increased trade and investment, taking into consideration the regional dimensions. Public-private partnership, PPP, through the TICAD process is an important modality to make African governments aware of the requirement of Japanese companies. Number 4, the role of regional economic communities is essential and serves as a foundation which has been developed over decades. The RECs would contribute greatly towards achieving the integration of Africa and objectives of the AFCFTA. Through simplification and streamlining, the RECs would increase the efficiency and effectiveness. African countries should continue to cooperate with relevant RECs as the building blocks of AFCFTA, with a view to achieving continental integration. Finally, number 5, but not least important, the dynamic actors, these are key. Dynamic actors of AFCFTA are women and youth. Job creation for them is essential for vigorous economic growth and development in African countries. Such business opportunities and job creation should be beyond national requirement, and the free movement of these populations should be encouraged through AFCFTA processes. This is the end of the proposed principles, and you are most welcome to make a comment or suggestions, if you wish, through the internet. So with that, I would like to conclude, but let me just quote what Mr. Wankele Mene, who mentioned or who said, AFCFTA is not just a trade agreement. This is our hope for Africa, to be lifted up from poverty. With that word, I would like to conclude this session, and I would like to thank you, all of you, for active participation and valuable contribution. We will have this in our shoulders and many homework to place them on the ground. I thank you very much, and I wish you for best and good day. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
池上先生、大使閣下並びに登壇者の皆様方、ありがとうございました。では、これをもちましてセッション5、アフリカの地域統合を終了とさせていただきます。次のセッション6、アフリカの人々の生活の質の向上は、明日7月8日の日本時間、夕方の5時、17時から開催となりますので、ぜひご参加ください。また本日の動画も本プログラム終了後、アーカイブとしてご視聴いただけます。プルダウンメニューから本日の日付、セッションとご希望の言語を選択してご視聴ください。本フォーラム終了後、アンケートがポップアップで表示されますので、皆様のご協力をお願い申し上げます。すぐのご回答難しい場合は、イベントページの右上にございますクリップボードのマークをクリックいたしますと、アンケート一覧が表示されますので、そちらよりご回答お願いいたします。また本セッションと並行いたしまして、オンラインビジネスマッチングが7月16日まで行われております。一般視聴者としてご参加の方でビジネスマッチングにご参加をご希望される方、JABF 事務局までどうぞふるってご連絡ください。本日は最後までご参加を賜りまして誠にありがとうございました。